it's time to stand up to efforts across our country to undermine worker bargaining power. Republican governors like Scott Walker have made their names stomping on workers' rights.
That's quite a love letter from Hillary to Scott Walker. I say that's a badge of honor. If Hillary's naming you by name, you have to have done something really, really cool in your state. You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction, the Laura Ingraham Show. We have a lot to get to, and we'll get through it together. The aforementioned governor of the great state of Wisconsin, newly announced presidential candidate, and that makes 15 in the GOP field, Scott Walker. Governor, it is great to talk to you. How are you?
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me on. What a pleasure. Yeah, when Hillary Clinton's going after you by name, it's kind of like when the president took a shot at the right to work, or when he said I needed to bone up on foreign policy. This from the guy who called ISIS the JV squad in Yemen a success story. But when they're after us, I guess that just means they know we don't just fight, we fight and win, and that's what scares them the most.
Well, there's so much to talk to, and I know you've chimed in on the Iran deal, which by all accounts is just a complete disaster. It's an item in the president's progressive bucket list that he thinks he can check off now. But if you were advising Boehner and McConnell now, because their GOP numbers on Capitol Hill are about 19% approval rating, so you advise the two of them now. What do you tell them to do?
You got to be big and you got to be bold. And if we're going to make the case to the American people, not just to elect a new president, but to not just keep the House, but hopefully keep the United States Senate with Republicans, I got to show people what that means. And I think, I'm in South Carolina today. I was in Nevada yesterday. I'm on a 28-hour kick without my head having hit a pillow. So it's around the clock campaigning, but it's great being out talking to people, and I hear the frustration where you and I have talked about it before. They're like, hey, we just got a Republican senator elected. Why aren't we taking a vote to repeal Obamacare and putting it on the president's desk? Why aren't we pushing back on his illegal actions on immigration? Why are we not pushing back on issue after issue? I think they should put as many big, bold ideas on the table and show the American people what the contrast is. Certainly what I'm going to talk about.
Governor Walker, I have just written a piece called Branding the Elephant, and it's for our new website called lifezet.com. And in the piece, I argue that Republicans on Capitol Hill, I'm not talking about the gubernatorial level, and the governors across the country, most of them are just doing a bang-up job. But on Capitol Hill, there is such great discontent among the grassroots voters. You ticked off a number of issues. They campaigned to stand against executive amnesty. They punted it to the courts. They campaigned to resist Obama. They delivered a huge deal on trade that, again, is another little item in his checklist. And now they're complaining he's not a good negotiator with Iran. Well, they think he's a good negotiator with China on trade, I guess. So tell us about that disconnect with John Boehner, Mitch McConnell, and many of the others in the GOP leadership in their strategy to date.
Well, it can't just be talk. I mean, I think people, not just Republicans, but I think voters in general understand the difference between rhetoric and actually getting things done. I think it's part of the reason why I won, for example, 3 times in a blue state, was because people wanted someone who can both fight and win. And they need to clearly lay out what they're for. It's not enough just to pick an issue or two and say this is what we're against. People need to know what's the contrast. And we've got a great story to tell. We can talk about repealing Obamacare and putting patients and families back in charge of health care.
They're not doing that. They basically gave it up, though, Governor. They gave that up this year. They're not doing anything.
We should keep pushing. Well, they should bring it up, and they should put it on his desk. We could talk about, truly reining in federal regulations. We can talk about pushing yet again on the Keystone Pipeline and other ways to have an all-the-above energy strategies. We can talk about taking power out of Washington and sending it back not just to our states, but to the hardworking people of America. We can talk about tax relief and tax reform that actually allows Americans to keep more of their hard-earned money. Those are the things I talked about the other night in my kickoff. I was talking about today here in South Carolina. We'll be tomorrow in New Hampshire and over the weekend in Iowa. Those are the things people want to hear about. And they don't want to wait till there's a Republican president. They want to start hearing Republicans in Washington talk about it as well.
The disturbing video released yesterday, Lila Rose once again pulls back the curtain with Planned Parenthood. It turns out one of the Planned Parenthood head honchos she swirls a glass of Cabernet. Have you seen the video? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, it's mine. Well, think about this. I got attacked. In fact, Planned Parenthood and Emily's List spent almost $6 million running attack ads against me last year when I was up for election, and they tried to confuse people. I defunded Planned Parenthood. I just think there's much better ways to provide assistance for women's health. We shifted those resources to public health departments and other areas that are non-controversial. And people said, "Oh, they tried to attack us on women's health." This is not about women's health. This is the sort of things that money for Planned Parenthood goes to, and it's outrageous. And certainly people like you and I who are pro-life feel that way, but I think most Americans look at this and say, whether they think they're pro-life or not, that this is wrong. But these are the sorts of things that people like Hillary Clinton and President Obama and others stand up for. They're the ones who are the extremists.
They're entertaining the idea of selling fetal body parts, which they then say, well, that's just part of our fetal tissue program, Governor Walker. If you haven't watched this video, it's a few minutes long, watch it, because it as a mother, as someone who obviously is pro-life, I thought they were bad, but I didn't. This is a level of evil that I can't even express, and yet they're getting cover from all the usual suspects. Cover. And Republicans, what should Republicans on Capitol Hill, going back to doing what they say they're going to do, what should they do given this new news about Planned Parenthood?
Oh, I didn't mean to push back. Look at us in the States. I'm not the only one defunding Planned Parenthood, pushing back on this. We passed protections that outlaw this. We've done things like this that make the distinction at the state level. They need to send the strongest possible message in our nation's capital as well. And again, I think this is one of those where it's not only the right thing to do, I think it is a politically wise thing to do, because you need to push it the other way, push it back and say, no, Clinton, Obama, others like them, they are the extremists. They are in touch with where Main Street America's at. Main Street America knows that this is wrong.
So you would push McConnell, Boehner, et cetera, to defund Planned Parenthood, get a bill on the president's desk, and do what you can to override any veto.
Absolutely. Keep making the case and make people take those votes. Heck, I think if you look in the House and the Senate, and there aren't many left, but any of the Democrats that are, the supposed kind of blue dog Democrats, how do they justify that? How do they justify that in many of these battleground swing districts across America? This is what, I know over the years, and even in parts of my state that vote more Democrat than Republican, these are things that will still outrage people regardless of party, because people know what's right, they know what's wrong, and when they see a video like that, they know it's just wrong.
We're talking to Governor Scott Walker, Republican candidate for the presidency now, just announced. I know you've seen this story. Apparently one of your aides, a longtime aide, anonymously told the National Journal that the contender's strategy, your strategy, will be to first lock up conservatives and then move to a more moderate position later on in the campaign. He said, look, you start in Iowa, lock up conservatives, because if you don't do that, none of the rest matters. And it's much easier to move from being a conservative to being middle of the road, moderate later on. Is that what you're going to do? Move to the middle after arguing that you're the real conservative in this race?
No, and I think, again, anybody who has any questions about that need only look at what I've done in Wisconsin. I mean, there's arguably a more compelling case to have done that in a state where that state hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984, when Ronald Reagan was last up for election and won everything but my neighbor Minnesota and the District of Columbia. No, that the distinction there is you make your case on strong conservative values, and then you talk about it in a way that not only gets the base ginned up and supportive of that, you talk about it in a way that appeals to independents and even some discerning Democrats. That's what we've done. We've shown that can work. We by no ways back. I mean, if people look at my record of the last 4+ years, 25th state to have right to work, prevailing wage reform, $2 billion of tax cuts, lower property tax today when we started.
Your record is terrific.
Defunded Planned Parenthood, Castle Doctrine, requiring a photo ID to vote. I think if anyone has any question about that, it's really about, and I think this is where they misinterpret it, it's how you articulate that to the American people. I'll give you a good example. I think some of even the other Republican candidates in this race for president like to misinterpret an ad I ran last year that talked about me defending one of the most pro-life pieces of legislation in the country, something that requires an ultrasound before someone is able to end their pregnancy, because we know if people can see that unborn child, particularly with the latest technology,
I love
the
that.
odds are pretty high they're going to keep the baby.
Right.
We talked about it in a way that used the other side's language to explain exactly what we're doing, and now some are trying to twist that into saying that we're not pro-life. I'm 100% pro-life. It's why Wisconsin Right to Life always supported me out there. But that's what's going to happen going forward, and we need places like this to get the truth out.
We're talking to Governor Scott Walker. A new poll out. We'll talk about that in just a moment. About the issue of pro-life, because I think this should be settled once and for all. And I sat next to you. Remember that dinner I was at with you? When was that? A couple of years ago?
Right to Life.
That was
That's
such
right.
an amazing dinner.
In the Wisconsin Center.
And Governor, I have to tell everybody this story. I might have told it once before, but in case people missed it, I've been to many of these pro-life dinners because I do a lot of them. And oftentimes governors will come and they'll do a drop-by and they'll take a few photos and then they'll leave. And I mean, they have a busy schedule. I'm not begrudging that. But Scott Walker and his wife not only came to meet all of the volunteers and all the people involved in Wisconsin Right to Life, you sat through the whole dinner, all the testimonials, the video presentation. You know, you endured my speech, Governor, but you sat through the entire dinner and you left when everybody else left. Let me just tell you, folks, that just doesn't happen very often in politics today. And that meant a lot to the people who volunteer on the ground. It meant a lot to me personally, but it showed me a lot. But I do want to clarify this thing with the pro-life, because you know my position on this, and I know where your heart is on this. But on this ad that ran during the campaign in 2014, let's listen.
Hi, I'm Scott Walker. I'm pro-life. But there's no doubt in my mind the decision of whether or not to end a pregnancy is an agonizing one. That's why I support legislation to increase safety and to provide more information for a woman considering her options. The bill leaves the final decision to a woman and her doctor.
Why the last line?
Because we wanted to make the point. You had the pro-abortion, the NARAL and Emily's List and Planned Parenthood and others out there trying to twist our ultrasound language into something that it wasn't. We wanted to make the case. This is all it does. It doesn't do anything else. For all of them complaining about this, it doesn't change that decision. I still believe that that you're talking about an unborn child as a human being, and I believe that, and I've articulated that for more than 20 years, all the way back to a lot of the people you were sitting with were folks I worked with at Marquette Students for Life when I was a student in college. I've always had a strong pro-life position. I've always defended that. But for us, it made able to make and wipe that issue right off the table, because we pushed back and said what we were proposing was a positive, strong, common sense.
But you don't believe. I just want to clarify this, Governor. You don't believe that. You don't believe the final decision should be between a woman and her doctor. You believe.
No, I believe it's an unborn child.
Okay.
But my point was in pointing that out is the bill. All it does is require an ultrasound. It didn't change what the law.
I get it. I get it. I think it was important that you said that, and we clarified that. All right, the new poll out. I know you saw. Trump is number 1, 17%. Bush is number 2, 14%. You're at 8%. Donald Trump on immigration. I know you've not wanted to talk a lot about him or his position, but let's listen to one thing.
Illegal immigrants are causing tremendous crime, and nobody wants to talk about it. And that's why Fox, at least Fox, and you won't leave this perhaps, but at least Fox is being honest, because they're now talking about it big league. And if I didn't bring up the subject a number of weeks ago, we wouldn't even be talking about illegal immigration right now.
Do you intend to meet with some of the victims of illegal immigration and illegal immigrant crime specifically? And do you agree with what Trump said there?
I think there's a compelling argument for that. I've gone for the request and offer of Governor Abbott. I've gone to the border and met with folks in the state, local, as well as federal officials. I'm going to go on the border in Arizona with state officials there and others across the country. And that helped me really see how very significant it is. As you know, I've said many times this week, Donald Trump can speak for himself. But what I believe, having been to the border, having talked to folks, having watched the videos, is that we've got international criminal organizations penetrating our southern border in a way that if this was happening in our water-based ports on the east or west coast, we'd be sitting in the Coast Guard, if
But
not
he's
the
taking
Navy.
some of your supporters right now. There's no doubt about it. He's bleeding away some of your support. So all you're going to say is he can speak for himself. Don't you have to win those voters back?
It's July of 2015, not July of 2016. I think in the end, when people look at where I stand, not just on that issue, but a whole bunch of others, I mean, for me, it's clear. I believe we need to take action to not just talk about it, but fundamentally secure the border.
So you think he's just talking? He won't do anything?
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what I'm saying is I believe we need to take action to secure the border, to uphold the law, no amnesty. I don't believe in amnesty for citizenship, and I believe going forward, and you and I have talked about this, I believe we need to give priority when it comes to legal immigration. We need to give priority overall to making sure we're standing up for American working families and their wages in a way that will improve the economy. Now, I think as people hear about that and other issues, they'll say, a lot of great candidates talking a lot of good stuff out there, but who is the one in the race who's fought and won on issues?
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Thanks for listening to this podcast excerpt of The Laura Ingraham Show. If you'd like to receive podcasts of our complete shows, go to lauraingraham.com and sign up to become a member of Laura 365. Our Laura 365 members get commercial-free streams and podcasts of our shows every day we're on the air. And also, you can listen to the last 30 days of The Laura Ingraham Show. Be ahead of the curve. Join Laura 365.